we'll go for it. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards. I'm Chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. Very warm welcome to residents who have attended and also to any who may be watching us live on our YouTube channel. Just to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that it is being broadcast live. The camera is just forward of you in the little dome at the front, but anybody who comes forward to speak to the committee will be visible. Those in the public gallery aren't. However, you can always replay this at your own leisure on YouTube if you ever wish to. Okay, fire alarms. Let's go through the normal business. None are expected. We're not expecting one this evening, so if it does go, we will be evacuating. The fire exits are the way you came in, through the doors there, and if for whatever reason they're blocked, there are fire exits behind us. Don't worry about it. We will all be leaving together. We will ensure you're out safely. We'll be going out those doors, out the next set of doors, and down through to our car parks. So don't worry about that. Mobile devices, please. Can I ask everybody has their mobile device turned to silent? Residents' feedback forms have been provided on the chairs. We do invite you to provide comment to help us make our meetings more accessible. So let us know what we do well and let us know what we could do better on. And we will endeavour to change. They go to Luke Democratic Services. They don't come to us as councillors or the committee. So you can be very open. They'll filter out anything necessary. Okay, a little bit about the way the meeting is run. You'll hear a little bit about part one and part two when we get into the full agenda. Although we are meeting in public, it isn't a public meeting and therefore there are no speaking rights, only those that have submitted a petition or the applicant in response to a petition against an application. We'll talk a little bit more about how the petitions happen as we move into it. And we'll also hear about part one and part two. And part one of the meeting are the actual applications, and they are the ones that you're here really interested in, and they're discussed in public. We move into part two, and they're private matters which are around matters of enforcement. And we do that in private because it is not in the public interest that we discuss matters that could end up in court. It can create problems. And therefore, we do move into a private session, and we break the YouTube link at that point. The items at which we discuss are published, as are the decisions. It's just the discussion that is in private. Okay, now, a number of people around the room. You may wonder who they are and what we all do. The committee is made up of members, councillors, and I will introduce them to you. On my far left-hand side, Councillor John Morse, Councillor John Oswald, Councillor Peter Money. And on my far right-hand side, Councillor Brian Stead, Councillor Roy Chamdale, Councillor Sharar Ahmed Walana, and we have Councillor David Yarrow. Now, alongside me, we have a table of experts that are here to assist us should we need their assistance. Glenn Egan on my far left is our legal advisor. Luke Taylor, Democratic Services. James Rogers, Head of Planning. Meg Harani will be introducing each application and giving committee members an outline of the actual application. Each member has read the full report, though, before they've come into committee, so it needn't cover every issue that is published within the report. And Alan Tilley is our Transport and Aviation Manager. Okay. The voting members are the members, and I will only vote in the event that there is a tied vote. In the unlikely event there's a tied vote. We very quickly will dance through some formal bits of the agenda, and before you know it, we'll be at item 6, which are the bits that you're interested in. But we do need to start and go through with item 1, apologies for absence.
We had apologies from Councillor Kashid, and Councillor Oswald is substituting.
And Councillor Alan Chapman.
Late from Councillor Alan Chapman, who's unwell. Thank you. Colleagues, any additional declarations of interest in matters coming before the meeting this evening? Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 13, which is part 2, I raised the issue and I will stay in the room but not take part in any discussions.
Thank you very much. Item 3, sign and receive the minutes of the previous meeting. Are they agreed, colleagues? Agreed. Thank you very much. Matters to be notified in advance or urgent. There are none. And item 5, and it is to confirm there are items in both the public part 1 of the meeting, and in part 2. So, as I say, we will break. So we're now actually at item 6, which is the bit that you're really interested in, with the applications. And we'll start with item 6, number 7 to 21 Norfolk Road. Please, Mr. Ronnie.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could ask your indulgence and introduce items 6 and 7. They relate to the same property, a very similar development. So if I can, obviously there'll be 2 separate votes, but if I can cover both in one presentation. Thank you. 7 to 21 Norfolk Road is located on the northwest side of the road and comprises a 2-storey block of flats. The site is within the North Uxbridge area special local character. There are 2 applications for members to consider, both of which involve the reconfiguration of flat 11 within the existing building, 3 new dormers to the rear and 4 front roof lights to provide an additional 2-bed self-contained flat in the roof. The site is the subject of a lengthy planning history, and this is set out in detail on pages 9 to 12 of the agenda. The applications are the subject of a number of letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 13 to 14 and 28 to 29 of the agenda. The main issue in both cases for members to consider are the impact of the scheme on the character of the property and the visual amenities of the surrounding area and the provision of amenity space. In terms of the impact on the visual amenity, with regard to the design of dormers, the Council has an adopted supplementary planning document entitled Residential Extensions that it is, and within that it's stated that it's important that roof extensions relate well to the proportions and massing of the existing building. In both applications it's considered that the size, scale, bulk and design of the dormers fails to relate to the size of the roof within which it is set and will thus impact unacceptably on the character and appearance of the original building and the visual amenities of the street scene and the wider North Uxbridge area special local character. In terms of the amenity space, Council's policy B23 requires that new residential development provides amenity space which is sufficient to protect the amenity of the occupants of the proposed flats or residential buildings. The Council's adopted supplementary planning document on residential layouts requires that a 2-bed flat is provided with a minimum of 25 square metres of amenity space. Submitted plans do not include any external amenity space for the proposed flat. As such, a proposal is considered to be substandard form of accommodation for future residents. Whilst it's accepted that the size of the unit and parking provision complies with the Council's normal requirements, the proposed roof additions are considered to be intrusive features and the proposal fails to provide amenity space to meet the required standard. The applications are both thus recommended for refusal. I can just go through the plans. That shows the extent of the area of special local character. This is the existing layout and the proposed floor plans. This is the existing elevations and the proposed front and sections, and that's the rear. This one, I'll point out the differences when we get to the next application. In essence, these are tile hung and set within the roof and set up from the eaves level, and that's the existing front elevation. There is one parking space that's proposed, which would meet the standard for a 2-bed flat, and this is the existing building. I can just go to the plans for the second application. You'll see that in this case you could almost class that as a second-storey extension as opposed to a dormer, because it's not set up from the roofs, it comes off the main wall and it is set up to the ridge, and they're not tile hung, they're rendered. So those are the differences between the 2 applications, and again the photographs are the same. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Petition's been submitted by an AC Petty. Present? Not at all. Okay. Notwithstanding that, the applicant, our agent, does have a right of response. Mr. Rishak Properties Limited, present? Mr. David Ewins is the agent? No. Okay, so no speakers of that. However, the Ward Councillor, Councillor George Cooper, you may wish to speak to the committee. Please come forward then. Councillor, you have 3 minutes of speaking time, controlled by the lights you're familiar with and the microphone button that you are also familiar with.
Firstly, Chairman, I'd like to thank officers for a very comprehensive report that describes these properties in clear detail. I must confess my knowledge of these properties goes back over 40 years. In fact, one of the earliest photographs I have of myself is in what these days would be called a romper suit in the garden of one of these apartments, which my grandparents lived in until they acquired a house after Adolf Hitler had redesigned their property in North London. I think the officers' comments were well made, and particularly in the conclusion where they refer to, makes quite clear that as such the proposal will provide substandard form of accommodation. When you look at the dimensions of the proposed rooms, they are well below what these days would be accepted as normal, and the lack of amenity space is absolutely unforgivable. I therefore would ask you to support the officer recommendation. I said it wouldn't be very long, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions at all? Thank you. Colleagues, yes, Councillor Oswald.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'll start it off if you like. I think there are enough reasons to refuse this. Certainly on page 7, under the recommendation, and as Councillor Cooper has said, in the conclusion on page 19, I'll move the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Yarrow?
I couldn't agree more with what Councillor Oswald and Councillor Cooper have just said, and I will second the recommendations to accept the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. 1 second, if you may. Sorry, my confusion on some wording around the paper. That's fine. So we have it formally proposed and seconded. Show of hands, please, on that one. This is number 6. Thank you. That one's refused. And again on same proposer and seconder on item 7.
Yeah, I'll propose it again.
Thank you. Seconded again. Show of hands, please, on that one. Thank you. That's everybody. Thank you very much. That's refused. Now on to agenda item 8. Land adjacent to 1 Belgrade Mews, Cowley.
Thank you, Chairman. Members may recall an application that came to committee in November for exactly the same development. That application was presented to members because we had received an appeal against non-determination, and members made the decision that they would oppose the application and fight the appeal. As I say, this application is exactly the same. The siting of the garage has not changed. The garage is not related to number 1, nor is it related to any of the other properties in Belgrade Mews. It is a freestanding garage. It is sited forward of the building line. It is a strong building line along Belgrade Mews. We feel that it is an intrusive development in the street scene, and for that reason it is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bakeri, petition, you wish to come forward and address this again? Yeah, well, please take a seat. I just need to tell you, you do have 5 minutes. You don't need to use it all. When you do address us, would you please use the microphone? You will see some lights here, 4 minutes on green and 1 on amber. When it comes to red, I must stop you. And yes, press it, and then you may say as much or as little as you wish, recognising that not much has changed, not much might need to be said.
We, the residents of Belgrade Mews, are objecting in allowing Mr. David to be granted permission to build a garage in the land that is adjacent to 1 Belgrade Mews. For the reason that is outside of the building line, its scale, its overall the size and its height and design will result in visually obstructive from the development. We strongly support Hillingdon Council in its recommendation that the proposal be refused. At the moment, the land is used for parking space for 2 cars. If granted, this right will be taken away from the residents, just as the right to park in the previous lands next to the garages that were taken away from the residents of Belgrade Mews from Mr. Davy. To further clarify my point, Mr. Davy does not live in Belgrade Mews. He owns number 8, which is rented, and owes a further 3 garages, one of which is a double, and neither of 3-4 garage spaces have actually been used to park cars. What is the purpose of this garage? So that he could apply for a single flat just as he has done previously. Also, Mr. Davy owns the land. In the deed, it is specified that there are third parties involved, such as the land being subject to rights of drainage, the rights of respect of water, gas and electricity supply services. The land is subject to use as a car parking area, that's what it says in the title deed as well. On the previous application made by Mr. Davy before we moved in, residents of Belgrade Mews contacted Crest Homes in 2003, and we do have a letter from them. They wrote back to the residents and stated that on both occasions it was made clear to Mr. Davy that he accepted the land subject to all existing legality enforcement third-party rights. It was left to Mr. Davy to find out what those rights might be, which would be clear to him as he lives close by. Mr. Davy has requested me to move the car several times, verbally and in writing. He said that if he didn't move immediately, he would involve the police and get involved with us. If so, he still hasn't done that. The fence Mr. Davy has placed it by the land has frequently been damaged by strong winds. On the first occasion, Mr. Davy approached a number of pensioners on our side of the road and took money to rebuild the fence. As it is his property and he was the one who put the fence on that place, he doesn't look after the fence, but he just asking for money to build it. Additionally, all the houses in Belgrade Mews have the exact same plan. Ground floor is around 40 meters square for every house. With his 4 garages, he has more space than his house, number 8. If Mr. Davy is granted permission to build a garage, then surely we can also apply for the same permission without obstructing the council, as it will fit the criteria. Hypothetically, the garage will be within the building line if we were to apply. Unlike Mr. Davy, both sides of the garage will be in a straight line. Again, unlike Mr. Davy, one of the sides is slanted. Having said this, the space between the edge of the house and the side of the land adjacent to number 1 Belgrade Mews is more than 5 meters is more than enough space to build a double garage turned into a studio flat. Similarly, number 7 has got the same land. Also, they can apply to build the garages adjacent to their house. Same with number 16. Granting of permission of this garage, however enormous, would set the undesirable precedent of homeowners to do the same, which would further harm the appearance of Belgrade Mews. If we keep adding garages to Belgrade Mews, then this road will no longer resemble peaceful community, but it will look like shanty town. Why does Mr. Davy need a 5th garage? With all the space he has, shouldn't the amount of garages we have should be equal to the amount of the houses?
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions at all? Clarification of the petitioner? Thank you very much. We invite you to return to your seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant, Mr. David, present? The agent, Mr. Gillette? I understand that Councillor Judith Cooper wishes to speak. If you'd like to come forward, the microphone is on for you. 3 minutes speaking time, as you're aware with the lights. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will, as ever, be brief. The petitioner has made a cogent case for refusal, and it supports the officer's case. Belgrade Mews is an attractive, coherent estate which would be undermined by such an intrusive development as is proposed here. I'd like to compliment officers on presenting a very clear case with a strong reason for refusal. Finally, I'd like to endorse the officer's report and request the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicely succinct. Colleagues, any questions at all? Councillor Yarrow.
I don't think there's any need for any questions and any further discussion, quite frankly. We've been through all this before. I move that we accept the officer's recommendations forthwith.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morse.
Mr. Chairman, this obviously contradicts a large number of our policies. I second that proposal.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on this one. That is everybody. Thank you. That application has been refused. It's agenda item 9, and number 2, Wimborne Avenue, Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 Wimborne Avenue is a corner property located at the junction of 2 roads, and if I can point members to pages 47 and 48, they'll see that there is extensive history on this site. There have been a number of refusals and an approval. I have the plans for those applications, and it's probably best that we compare them and point out the differences and the reasons why this application is recommended as it is. This is the proposed plan. It has a width on the first floor of 3 metres, on the ground of 3.5 metres. It is an increase of 0.5 metre to the side on the ground floor. These are the existing floor plans and the proposed elevations. And this is the refused application. That had a width of 3.9 metres, so it was 400 millimetres more than was proposed. This application was refused and dismissed at appeal, and the inspector's comments, or the relevant comments, are set out on page 51 at the top of the page. And the approved application is this one, which was 3 metres on both floors and included a reduced extension on the first floor. So in the refused application and dismissed, the first floor went beyond the rear of the existing property, and the approved application was at the rear of the existing property. The current application proposes to again go up to the rear on the first floor and increases on the ground floor. Your officers consider that it is an on-balance recommendation, but the increase in 0.5 metre does make the difference between preserving the openness of the character, or the open character of the corner, and not doing so, and that is the reason why it is recommended for refusal. I have to say that the council has been particularly successful on these corner plots, and in both single-storey and 2-storey extensions, and we have balanced those reasons for refusal against the appeal decisions that we've received. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harani. Colleagues, anybody help us on this one? Councillor Oswald.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'll move the officer's recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Yeo.
I'll second the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on this one. Again, refused unanimously. Number 10, 16 Blacklands Drive.
Thank you, Chairman. This property has been extended substantially. It was granted permission for extensions, and that permission has been implemented. So the current application does not involve any extensions. It is a conversion of the existing dwelling to a 1-bed and a 2-bed flat, or 2-bed dwelling. The application complies with the council's standards in terms of the internal layout, the size of the flats that are being proposed. Or the size of the dwellings that are being proposed. This is the existing ground floor and the proposed layout and the proposed floor layouts. The size of the rooms comply. There is parking provision for 3 parking spaces, 2 at the front, 1 to the rear. The crossovers exist, and therefore your officers feel that in this case all the standards and all the requirements have been met. The amenity space requirement is also met. So your officers consider that the application can be recommended for approval. There is an addendum sheet an additional condition is recommended relating to the parking allocation. It should say the 2-bed dwelling and the 1-bed unit as opposed to the 3 and 2. If I can make that amendment verbally, then that condition relates to providing the 2 parking spaces at the front to the larger dwelling and the 1 parking space to the rear to the smaller dwelling. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Oswald.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'll move the officer's recommendation with the additional condition.
Thank you.
It's in policy.
Councillor
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, on this one. Everybody, thank you. Application was approved. We now move to item 11, 141 Charvel Lane, Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application relating to 141 Charville Lane. The site is situated in the Greenbelt, as members can see. It is an application for the erection of 2 porter cabins, a single-storey workshop building, some fencing, and it does involve the removal of existing buildings on the site. As I said before, the application is in the Greenbelt, therefore we need to consider A, whether the proposed uses are compatible with that, and then B, whether the proposed buildings are compatible. We have tried to research the previous uses on the site. The site has been previously used as a scrapyard, and it is within the general industrial classification. The proposal is for general industrial use, and your officers feel that the use is therefore acceptable. In terms of the buildings that are proposed, there are a number of buildings on the site previously, and the proposed buildings involve a reduction in the overall floor space from those buildings, and again, for that reason, your officers feel that the buildings are acceptable. There is a difference in the siting, particularly to one building which is further forward of the building line. However, your officers feel that given its scale, it wouldn't intrude particularly on the openness of the Greenbelt, and for that reason they have recommended it for approval. There are a number of conditions which control the impact of the development on adjoining occupiers, and the adjoining occupiers are residential in use, so we have to be careful about the impact that such a use would have on those occupiers, but we also have to bear in mind the previous uses of the site. And so officers are recommending the application. Again, it is on balance, and they are on the basis that of the previous use and the previous buildings on the site. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, if I can just show you the plans. This is the site plan. It is difficult to tell the locations. These are the porter cabins and the proposed permanent buildings as they are. They are fairly industrial in appearance, but fairly low scale, as it were. This is a site as it is. Most of the previous buildings have been removed, and therefore it is fairly empty. you can see the closest residential development or residential property to the rear there, and again this is the site as it is. I can just go back to the aerial. You can see this is an aerial which has the previous buildings located there, and you can see that they were further back in the site than one of the proposed buildings on this particular application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. More challenging, this one. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm a little puzzled with this one, having looked at and read this in as much detail, in the detail that's there. And the question I have to ask is, what has changed from the previous refusal? It looks exactly the same as the one that we refused, and now we're saying accept it. So what has actually changed before I could make up my mind whether to accept or reject it?
Thank you. Mr. Harani or Mr. Roger, you're in a position to answer at this time?
There's one fairly straightforward answer, which is that we've received the highways information, which comprised one of the reasons for refusal last time, and the highways officers are satisfied with that information. The second reason is relating to the openness or the inappropriate use on the site, and I think previously we had very little information about the previous use of the site and the buildings that were on the site, and we did request in this particular case that that information was provided. We did get some information which we then considered was sufficient to justify the development. So it's a question of the further information that's been received regarding the previous uses on the site.
Thank you. I find myself in a similar position to Councillor Yarrow, that without a report that actually specifies what those changes are and how this now overcomes the inappropriate development in the Greenbelt and special circumstance, I'm not really in a position to form an opinion. And if I'm in that position, it may be that colleagues are also in that position. Councillor Oswald.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I am aware of this site because I'm one of the ward councillors. I think this proposal will certainly be better than what's already there. Yes, it's in the green belt, but it was a breaker's yard in a green belt, and I'm not keen on that. I think this is a better proposal. I'm quite comfortable with it. I think it'd be better for the people that live around there as well. I'm quite happy to move the officer's recommendations, but I'll leave it at that for the time being.
My fear is if we push it to a vote at this moment in time, members may feel as though they're not in a position to support the application, and an alternative way forward may be for a deferment to provide the additional information that is being sought, that then may allow other members to form an opinion in support of yours. That's where I'm at. Councillor Morse?
I'd like to ask a question. Can we condition that the portico cabins are removed on the cessation of the business? Because there is a slight argument here that we get an improvement because we actually reduced the profile of the building, and I've always taken the view that if we then have the condition they're removed, we've actually got a slight improvement in the green belt.
So I can help members on some of these issues. So the applicant has applied for these as permanent buildings, even though they have a slightly temporary appearance. So, I'm not getting a sense that my colleague disagrees. I think we'd have to go back to the applicant and discuss this with them if members wanted that to be part of the recommendation. I don't think you'd be able to impose that condition without us discussing it with the applicant, because they have applied for permanent buildings in this case. The other point I was going to say is if members want to look at page 82 and paragraph 7.05, I honestly think that this is an approval, but there is an issue, and this has been highlighted by Councillor Edwards and Councillor Yarrow, as to whether you've got enough information to satisfy you that officers are right recommending this for approval. And in hindsight, I am looking at this paragraph thinking, given the importance the government places on green belts and the level of policy protection they have, you might be entitled to say to me you'd want a slightly more detailed section of text that covers the impact on the green belt, which also picks up the various strands of planning history in slightly more detail. But obviously, if other members do have detailed local knowledge of the site, that can in itself be taken into consideration, and that may enable you to take this forward.
Thank you. Councillor Oswald.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm quite happy to withdraw the proposal if you think that a deferral will help and we get more information. There's obviously doubts about this.
I do believe that will be the case.
So I'll withdraw the proposal of accepting the officer's recommendation, and we can go on from there.
I think that is to give the applicant the fairest opportunity of having considered it favourably. I think the risk is if we push at this place, it may be refused on the basis of not enough information. Okay. Councillor Yarrow?
Yeah, and can I also add something to what Councillor Oswald said, and that is that I also agree that it is better than what was there before. I mean, it was a scrapyard before, so clearly this is and could enhance the green belt. However, I'm still puzzled.
So did the last one.
Yeah, exactly. So did the last one, and I really need that little bit of extra to say why it shifted its position. That's all.
Okay, proposed and seconded for a deferment. Is that agreed, everybody? Thank you very much. That one is deferred. Thank you. Agenda item 12, 382 Simpson Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the retention of hard standing and provision of some landscaping to the front of 382 Simpson Road. If I can just go to the plans. There is a coloured plan, or there was. Unfortunately, it hasn't come out. There we are. And the proposal does involve some landscaping to the frontage. The council does have a requirement that it should be 25%. In the addendum sheet, it sets out that this is not met, and it's set at 20% is what has been proposed. However, there is space on the frontage to provide the additional 5% without impacting on the car parking layout or the access to the building, and members may feel that a condition which requires that a minimum of 25% is provided, details are submitted within 1 month of the date of the approval, and I think that may be a way forward. If I can also request members' permission to amend condition 1, which is a time limit condition. The works have already in essence been carried out, and this is a variation to those, so a 3-year permission is not really relevant in this case, and I'm recommending that we amend it that the works are completed within 9 months of the permission, the date of the permission that's granted, if members agree. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Colleagues, by adjusting it to a 25%, it becomes policy compliant, and also by reducing the implementation period, it is actually making the retrospective work happen more immediately. So I think this is a very appropriate suggestion being put forward. Anybody help me here on this one? Councillor Oswald, thank you very much for your assistance again.
Yeah, doing a bit of work tonight, it's good, isn't it? Yeah, I'll move the officer's recommendation. I think it looks all right to me, providing it's compliant then.
Thank you very much. So subject to the amendment of the 25% and the 9 months. Councillor Yarrow?
Absolutely, and I'll second that, yes.
Show of hands, please, on this one. Thank you very much. Let's now move into part 2.